The night my life changed forever began with laughter, music, and the clink of glasses in our candlelit dining room. It was supposed to be a celebration, my daughter's engagement, a rare moment when both sides of our family gathered under one roof. I'd spent days preparing, making sure every detail was perfect, from the playlist to the flowers to the towering cake in the center of the table. My wife, Laura, had been distant all week, her smiles brittle, her words clipped, but I chalked it up to nerves. She'd always been a perfectionist, and family gatherings brought out her sharpest edges. As the evening wore on, the wine flowed and the conversation grew louder. Laura's eyes darted from guest to guest, her jaw clenched, her fingers drumming on the tablecloth. I tried to catch her eye, to offer a reassuring smile, but she looked through me as if I were a stranger. When the toasts began, Laura stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. She raised her glass, her voice trembling, with a mix of anger and something darker. "To family," she said, her eyes fixed on me. "To secrets, to lies, to the things we pretend not to see." Before anyone could react, she hurled her champagne across the table, the golden liquid arcing through the air and splattering across my shirt. Gasps rippled around the room. Laura grabbed the cake knife, slashed through the tears, and sent the top layer crashing to the floor. "You all think he's perfect," she shouted, her voice rising above the stunned silence. "But you don't know what he's done. You don't know what he's hiding." My mother-in-law shrieked, my daughter burst into tears, and my brother-in-law tried to calm Laura, but she shoved him away, her face twisted with rage. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, humiliation burning in my cheeks. I glanced at my daughter, her mascara streaking down her face, and felt something inside me snap. If you enjoy powerful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. I took a deep breath, wiped the champagne from my eyes, and met Laura's gaze. "If you want the truth, Laura, let's give them the truth." The room fell silent, every eye on me. I reached into my pocket, feeling the weight of the envelope I'd carried for weeks. A collection of evidence, contracts, and secrets Laura never thought I'd find. I laid it on the table, my hand steady. "You want to talk about secrets? Let's start with yours." Laura's face went white, her bravado crumbling. She started to scream, but this time I was ready. The night was far from over, and the real story was just beginning. The room was frozen in shock, the only sound the slow drip of champagne from the table onto the hardwood floor. Laura's chest heaved as she glared at me, her hands clenched into fists, but I refused to look away. I picked up the envelope, feeling the weight of every sleepless night, every suspicion, every quiet humiliation I'd endured for years. "You want to talk about secrets, Laura?" I said, my voice steady, echoing in the stunned silence. "Let's talk about the offshore account you opened last year, the one you thought I'd never find." Laura's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing as if she were searching for words. My brother-in-law, who had been trying to calm her, stepped back, his eyes wide. My daughter, still crying, looked from me to her mother, confusion and fear etched across her face. I slid the first document from the envelope, a bank statement, printed in black and white, with Laura's signature at the bottom. "You transferred money from our joint account, Laura, thousands at a time. You told me it was for Emily's college fund, but it went to a bank in the Cayman Islands. Gasps rippled around the table. Laura lunged for the envelope, but I pulled it back, my resolve hardening. "Sit down, Laura. You wanted a scene. You got one." She hesitated, then collapsed into her chair, her hands shaking. I continued, my voice calm but relentless. "You want to talk about lies? Let's talk about the second phone I found in your purse, the one you used to text someone named M." I pulled out a stack of printed messages, each one more damning than the last. "You told me you were working late, but you were meeting him at hotels. You told Emily you were at book club, but you were in another city." Laura's scream cut through the room, raw and desperate. "You're lying. You're making this up." I shook my head, my eyes never leaving hers. "I have the receipts, Lau. I have the hotel records, the credit card statements, the security footage. You wanted to humiliate me in front of our family, but you never thought I'd fight back. My mother-in-law fainted, my brother-in-law cursed, and my daughter stared at her mother in horror. The guests began to murmur, some edging toward the door, others pulling out their phones to record the chaos. Laura tried to stand, but her legs gave out. "You can't do this," she sobbed. "You can't ruin me." I leaned in, my voice low. "You did this to yourself. I'm just telling the truth." The police arrived minutes later, called by a neighbor who'd heard the shouting. I handed them the envelope, explaining that I suspected financial fraud and infidelity. Laura was escorted from the house, still screaming, her mask finally shattered. As the guests filed out, I hugged Emily, whispering that everything would be okay. That night, as I sat alone in the wreckage of what was supposed to be a celebration, I realized that my life was about to change forever. But for the first time in years, I felt free. The war for my dignity, my future, and my daughter's happiness had just begun, and I was ready for every battle to come. The house was eerily silent after the last guest left. The only evidence of the night's chaos, a trail of broken glass, champagne-soaked napkins, and the ruined cake smeared across the dining room floor. I moved through the wreckage in a daze, my mind replaying every second of Laura's meltdown, every gasp and whisper from our stunned family. I found Emily sitting on the back steps, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes red from crying. I sat beside her, unsure what to say, but she spoke first, her voice trembling. "Dad, is it true? Did Mum really do all those things?" I nodded, my heart breaking for her. "I'm sorry, Em. I never wanted you to find out this way. But I couldn't let her destroy us with lies." She leaned into me, and for a long time we just sat there, the night air cool and heavy with the scent of rain. When she finally went to bed, I called Tom, my lawyer and oldest friend. He answered on the first ring, his voice sharp with concern. "Mark, I saw the videos online. Half the family is texting me. Are you all right?" I told him everything, from the offshore account to the second phone, the hotel receipts, and the police taking Laura away. Tom whistled low. "You did the right thing, but you need to be ready. Laura's going to come at you with everything she's got. Lawyers, accusations, maybe even a restraining order. Start documenting everything, change the locks, secure your accounts. And Mark, don't talk to her without me present." I spent the rest of the night following his advice. I called the bank and froze our joint accounts, changed every password, and set up alerts for any suspicious activity. I emailed Tom copies of every document, every text, every receipt. I even downloaded the security footage from the front door camera, which showed Laura leaving with a suitcase hours before the party, her face set in grim determination. By dawn, I was exhausted but resolute. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching the sun rise over the mess of the previous night. Emily joined me, her hair tangled, her eyes swollen. "What happens now, Dad?" she asked. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Now we fight for what's ours. We fight for the truth." That morning the phone rang, a call from Laura's lawyer demanding access to the house to collect her belongings and threatening legal action if I refused. I told him to put everything in writing and to contact Tom. "I won't be bullied," I said, my voice steady, "and I won't let Laura rewrite history." As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm. The first battle was over, but the war for my dignity, my future, and my daughter's happiness had only just begun. I was ready for every twist, every accusation, every courtroom drama Laura could throw at me. And this time I would fight back with evidence, with strategy, and with the quiet, relentless power of a man who refused to be broken. The days that followed were a blur of legal maneuvers, whispered phone calls, and the constant low-level anxiety of waiting for the next blow to fall. I spent my mornings cleaning up the aftermath of the party, scrubbing champagne from the walls and sweeping up shards of glass, each task a small act of reclaiming my home. Emily helped where she could, her presence a comfort, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She asked about her mother, about what would happen next, and I answered as honestly as I could without burdening her with the ugliest details. Tom came over every evening, his briefcase full of paperwork and his mind sharp as ever. We reviewed every document, every text, every bank statement. He helped me draft a formal response to Laura's lawyer, outlining the evidence of her financial misconduct and infidelity, and making it clear that I would not tolerate any attempt to paint me as the villain. "You have the upper hand, Mark," Tom said, tapping the stack of evidence. "But you need to stay calm. Don't let her bait you into a fight. Let the facts speak for themselves." I took his advice to heart, refusing to engage with Laura's increasingly frantic texts and emails. She accused me of turning Emily against her, of stealing her money, of ruining her reputation. I replied only through Tom, each message measured and professional. The first court date arrived on a grey, rainy morning. I wore my best suit, my nerves masked by a calm determination. Emily stayed with Tom's wife, her support a quiet anchor. The courtroom was cold and formal, the air thick with tension. Laura sat at the plaintiff's table, her lawyer whispering urgently in her ear. She looked tired, her bravado from the party gone, replaced by a brittle defensiveness. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, listened as Laura's lawyer painted me as controlling, emotionally distant, and unfit as a husband and father. Then Tom stood and presented our evidence: bank statements, emails, the second phone, the hotel receipts, and the security footage. The judge watched the video of Laura's outburst at the party, her face unreadable. When it was my turn to speak, I described my love for Emily, my commitment to her happiness, and my willingness to share custody if it meant keeping her life stable. I spoke of the humiliation I'd endured, the betrayal, and the resolve that had carried me through. The judge asked a few pointed questions, then called a recess. As I stepped into the hallway, Tom clapped me on the back. "You did great, Mark. Now we wait." I nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and hope. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I believed I could win. Not just for myself, but for Emily. That night, as I sat with Emily on the porch, watching the rain, I promised her that no matter what happened, I would always fight for her, for the truth, and for the dignity our family deserved. The days after the first court hearing were a test of patience and resolve. I kept my routine steady for Emily's sake, making her breakfast, helping with homework, and walking her to the bus stop. But every moment was shadowed by the knowledge that Linda was plotting her next move. Tom and I met every evening, poring over new documents and strategizing for the next round. Linda's lawyer sent a barrage of demands, requests for spousal support, claims that I was hiding assets, accusations that I was manipulating Emily. Each time, Tom responded with calm, evidence-based rebuttals, attaching bank statements, emails, and even a timeline of my daily involvement in Emily's life. I kept a journal of every interaction with Linda, every phone call, every text, every time she tried to twist the narrative. Emily sensed the tension but never asked for details. I made sure our home was a haven, filled with laughter, movie nights, and the comfort of routine. One afternoon, I received a call from Emily's school counselor. "Mr. Carter, Emily's been quiet lately. She's doing well in class, but she seems distracted. Is everything all right at home?" I explained the situation as gently as I could, and the counselor offered to meet with Emily to give her a safe space to talk. Emily agreed, and after her first session, she came home lighter, more at ease. "It helps to talk, Dad," she said. "I just want things to be normal again." I hugged her, promising that we would get through this together. Meanwhile, Linda's social media campaign against me intensified. She posted cryptic messages about betrayal and losing everything, tagging mutual friends and even some of Emily's teachers. I resisted the urge to respond, knowing that any public argument would only hurt my case. Instead, I quietly collected screenshots, adding them to my growing file of evidence. Tom was relentless, filing motions to protect my reputation and ensure that Emily's best interests remained at the forefront. The next court date arrived on a blustery morning. Linda's lawyer tried to paint me as cold and unfeeling, but Tom countered with our mountain of evidence. Letters from teachers, photos from school events, the birthday video, and my detailed journal. The judge listened intently, her expression unreadable. When it was my turn to speak, I described my love for Emily, my commitment to her happiness, and my willingness to share custody if it meant keeping her life stable. The judge asked a few pointed questions, then called a recess. As I stepped into the hallway, Tom clapped me on the back. "You did great, Mark. Now we wait." I nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and hope. The battle was almost over, but the final verdict was still to come. That night, as Emily and I sat on the porch, watching the wind whip through the trees, I promised her that no matter what happened, I would always fight for her, for the truth, and for the dignity our family deserved. The day of the final custody hearing dawned cold and grey, the kind of morning that makes you question every decision you've ever made. I dressed carefully, choosing a navy suit and a tie Emily had given me for Father's Day, a small token of hope in a world that felt increasingly uncertain. Tom picked me up, his presence steady and reassuring. "You've done everything right, Mark. Today is about the truth." We arrived at the courthouse early, the halls already buzzing with lawyers, parents, and the low hum of anxiety. Emily stayed with Tom's wife, her support a quiet anchor. Linda was already there, her lawyer at her side, her face set in a mask of determination. The judge entered, her gaze sharp as she reviewed the mountain of evidence Tom and I had assembled. Bank statements, emails, letters from teachers, photos from school events, and my meticulously kept journal. Linda's lawyer tried to argue that I was manipulating Emily, that I was using my resources to paint myself as the perfect father. But Tom countered with calm, relentless logic, pointing out every inconsistency in Linda's story. Every gap in her timeline, every moment she had failed to show up for Emily. The judge listened, her expression unreadable, as Emily's counselor testified about her progress, her happiness, and her desire to stay with me. When it was my turn to speak, I looked the judge in the eye and spoke from the heart. "Your Honor, I love my daughter. I have always put her needs first. I am willing to share custody, to work with Linda, but I will not allow lies and manipulation to destroy our family." The judge nodded, her eyes softening. She turned to Linda, her voice firm. "Mrs. Carter, your actions have caused significant harm to your daughter and your husband. The evidence is clear. Custody will remain with Mr. Carter, with supervised visitation for you until further notice. You are ordered to continue counseling and to refrain from any public statements about this case." Linda's face crumpled, her bravado finally breaking. She began to sob, her lawyer patting her arm. The judge banged her gavel, signaling the end of the hearing. Tom squeezed my shoulder, his voice warm. "You did it, Mark. You fought with dignity and won." I nodded, relief and exhaustion washing over me. As I left the courthouse, the cold air felt like a baptism, washing away the last traces of fear and humiliation. Emily met me at home, her eyes shining with joy. "We did it, Dad. We're going to be okay." I hugged her tightly, my heart full. That night, as we sat by the fire, I realized that the war was finally over. We had survived every attack, every accusation, every attempt to tear us apart, and we had done it with evidence, with dignity, and with the quiet, relentless power of love. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, I believed we could face whatever came next. Together. The weeks after the final hearing felt like stepping into a new world, one where every sunrise brought a little more hope, and every night ended with a little less fear. Emily and I settled into a rhythm that was both familiar and new. School, homework, dinners at the kitchen table, and long walks through the neighborhood where we could talk about anything and everything. I made a point to keep our home a sanctuary, a place where laughter was encouraged and tears were met with comfort, not judgment. Linda's presence faded into the background, her supervised visits awkward but civil. Her attempts at manipulation now met with the firm boundaries set by the court. She tried at first to win Emily back with gifts and promises, but Emily saw through it, her trust in me unshakable. Tom and I continued to meet regularly, reviewing the last of the legal paperwork and making sure every detail was in order. He encouraged me to focus on the future, to let go of the anger that had fueled me for so long. "You've won, Mark. Now it's time to live." I took his advice to heart, throwing myself into my work and my role as a father. I started volunteering at the community center, helping other men navigate the legal system and sharing my story with those who felt powerless. The response was overwhelming. Men and women alike thanked me for my honesty, for showing them that it was possible to fight back with dignity and evidence. Emily thrived, her grades improving, her circle of friends growing. She joined the debate team, her confidence blossoming as she learned to use her voice. One evening, after a particularly spirited practice, she came home and hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Dad, for believing in me, for never giving up." I smiled, my heart full. "You're my hero, Em. You taught me what real strength looks like." As the seasons changed, so did we. The pain of the past lingered, but it no longer defined us. We were survivors, not victims, and every day was a testament to the power of truth, resilience, and the quiet strategic payback that had brought us here. The war was over, but the legacy of dignity and love would last a lifetime. As autumn deepened, the leaves turning gold and crimson, I found myself reflecting on how far Emily and I had come. The house was filled with warmth and laughter again, the kitchen alive with the smells of baking bread and simmering soup. Emily's friends became regular visitors, their voices echoing through the halls as they studied, debated, and planned for the future. I watched her grow into a young woman of strength and compassion, her scars fading into wisdom. Linda's visits became less frequent, her attempts at reconciliation met with polite distance. She completed her court-ordered counseling, and while she seemed more subdued, the trust between us was gone. I kept every interaction documented, every conversation logged, determined never to be caught off guard again. Tom and I continued our work at the community center, expanding our workshops to include not just legal rights, but also financial literacy and emotional resilience. The foundation Julia and I had started flourished, attracting new volunteers and donors. We launched a scholarship program for children of single parents, and Emily became its first ambassador, speaking at events and sharing her story with quiet courage. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you ever regret fighting so hard, Dad? Do you ever wish you'd just let it go?" I shook my head, my voice gentle but firm. "Never, Em. If I'd given up, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have this peace, this freedom. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones worth fighting." She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I'm glad you didn't give up. I'm glad you taught me to fight for myself." That night, I received a letter from Linda. She wrote of her continued progress in therapy, her gratitude for the chance to rebuild her relationship with Emily, and her hope that one day we could indeed all sit down together as a family. I replied with cautious optimism, acknowledging her growth and expressing my willingness to try. The next weekend, we arranged a small lunch at a quiet cafe. Linda arrived looking healthier, her eyes clearer, her voice steadier. The conversation was awkward at first, but as we talked about Emily's college adventures and the foundation's success, the old bitterness faded. We agreed to keep moving forward, one step at a time, for Emily's sake and our own. As the days grew shorter and the air turned crisp, I realized that the story of my revenge was no longer about winning or losing. It was about healing, about building something stronger from the ashes of betrayal, about the quiet, relentless power of truth and love. The scars remained, but they were a testament to our survival, not a mark of defeat. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, armed with evidence, dignity, and the unbreakable bond of family. Winter crept in quietly, frosting the windows and turning the city into a world of silver and blue. Emily's college acceptance letter arrived on a snowy morning, and we celebrated with hot chocolate and a fire in the living room, the two of us wrapped in blankets and hope. She was going to her dream school, and I could see the pride and excitement in her eyes, a light that had been missing for too long. Linda sent a card, congratulating Emily and offering to help with tuition, but Emily politely declined, choosing instead to apply for scholarships through the foundation. Our relationship with Linda remained cautious, marked by careful conversations and the unspoken understanding that trust would take years to rebuild. I continued my work at the community center, mentoring men who had been through their own battles, some with ex-wives, others with the legal system, all of them searching for dignity and a way forward. Tom and I launched a new series of workshops on silent strategic payback, teaching people how to use evidence, legal traps, and intellectual resilience to protect themselves without resorting to anger or violence. The response was overwhelming, and I found a deep satisfaction in helping others reclaim their lives. One evening, as Emily and I decorated the Christmas tree, she asked, "Do you think Mum will ever really change?" I thought for a moment, then answered honestly, "I hope so, Em, but even if she doesn't, we have each other, we have the truth." The holidays were quieter than in years past, but they were filled with genuine warmth. Dinners with friends, laughter around the table, and the quiet joy of knowing we had survived the storm. On New Year's Eve, Julia hosted a gathering for the Foundation's volunteers. As midnight approached, she raised a glass. To Mark, who taught us that the best revenge is living well, and to Emily, who reminds us that hope is always worth fighting for. The room erupted in applause, and I felt a surge of gratitude for the life I had rebuilt. As the fireworks lit up the sky, I hugged Emily and whispered, "We made it, kiddo. We really made it." That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the journey, the humiliation, the courtroom battles, the slow, steady work of healing. I realized that my story was no longer about Linda or the pain she had caused. It was about resilience, about the power of evidence and boundaries, about the quiet, relentless strength of a man who refused to be broken. The war was over, but the legacy of dignity, love, and silent strategic payback would last a lifetime. The new year brought a sense of clarity and purpose, as if the world itself was giving us permission to start over. Emily threw herself into preparations for college, her days filled with campus tours, scholarship essays, and late-night phone calls with new friends she'd met online. I watched her confidence grow, her laughter returning in full force, and I felt a pride so deep it almost hurt. Linda continued her therapy, and while our interactions remained formal, there was a new respect in her voice, a recognition of the boundaries I'd set and the man I'd become. She called one afternoon to discuss Emily's tuition, her tone careful but sincere. "I know I can't undo the past, Mark, but I want to help. I want to be part of her future if she'll let me." I agreed to let her contribute, but only through the foundation, ensuring every dollar was accounted for and every promise kept. Tom and I continued our work at the community center, expanding our workshops and mentoring more men who had been blindsided by betrayal. We developed a curriculum on legal traps, evidence gathering, and the importance of silent, strategic payback. The sessions were packed, and I found a deep satisfaction in helping others find their voice. One evening, after a particularly moving workshop, David pulled me aside. "You know, Mark, you've become a legend around here. People talk about your story like it's a roadmap for survival." I laughed, humbled by the thought. "I just did what I had to do, David. I refused to let anyone take my dignity." As spring approached, Emily and I spent our weekends exploring the city, visiting museums and trying new restaurants. We talked about everything, her hopes, her fears, her dreams for the future. She confided in me about a boy she liked, her worries about leaving home, and her excitement for the adventures ahead. I listened, offering advice when she asked, mostly just being there, a steady presence in a world that was always changing. One afternoon, as we sat in a cafe overlooking the river, Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you, Dad, for fighting for me, for teaching me to fight for myself." I smiled, my heart full. "You're my greatest victory, Em. Everything I did for you." That night, as I sat on the porch watching the stars, I realized that the story of my revenge was almost complete. The pain of the past had faded, replaced by a quiet strength and a deep, abiding love. The war was over, but the legacy of dignity, resilience, and silent, strategic payback would endure for generations to come. Spring arrived with a gentle warmth, and the city seemed to come alive again, the parks filling with laughter and the air scented with blooming flowers. Emily's excitement for college was contagious, and our home was filled with boxes, packing lists, and the nervous energy of new beginnings. I helped her sort through her things, offering advice on what to bring and what to leave behind, and we laughed about the mistakes I'd made when I was her age. Linda continued her therapy, and while our relationship remained cautious, there was a new honesty in our conversations. She called one evening to ask if she could join us for dinner before Emily left for school. I agreed, and we planned a small meal, just the three of us. No drama, no accusations. The night of the dinner, Linda arrived looking healthier, her eyes clearer, her voice steadier. The conversation was awkward at first, but as we talked about Emily's plans and the foundation's success, the old bitterness faded. Linda apologized again, her words halting but sincere. "I know I can never undo what I did, but I want to try to be better, for Emily and for myself." Emily listened, her face thoughtful, then nodded. "I forgive you, Mum, but I need time." After dinner, Linda left quietly, and Emily and I sat on the porch, watching the stars. "Do you think she'll ever really change?" Emily asked. I shrugged, my voice gentle. "That's up to her. All we can do is live our lives with honesty and kindness." The next day, I received a letter from the community center, inviting me to speak at a citywide event on evidence-based self-protection and legal rights. I accepted, eager to share what I had learned. The event was packed, the room buzzing with questions and gratitude. I spoke of my ordeal, the importance of documentation, and the strength it takes to stand up for oneself. As I looked out at the faces in the crowd, I knew And my journey had come full circle. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, a mentor, and a man who had reclaimed his life, one day at a time. That night, as Emily and I sat on the porch, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." I hugged her, my heart full. "You're my greatest victory, Em." The war was over, but the legacy of dignity, resilience, and silent strategic payback would last forever. The weeks leading up to Emily's move to college were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. We shopped for dorm supplies, debated over which posters to bring, and spent long evenings talking about everything from her hopes for the future to the fears she still carried from the past year. I could see how much she'd grown. Her confidence, her independence, her ability to set boundaries with both me and her mother. Linda called more often, sometimes just to check in, sometimes to ask for advice on her own journey of healing. Our conversations were still careful, but there was a new respect between us, a recognition that we had both survived something that could have destroyed us. The foundation Julia and I had started continued to thrive, and we launched a new initiative to help young adults like Emily navigate the legal and emotional challenges of family upheaval. David became a regular speaker at our workshops, sharing his story with a quiet strength that inspired everyone who heard him. One afternoon, as we packed the last of Emily's boxes, she found an old photo album tucked away in the back of a closet. We sat on the floor, flipping through pictures of birthdays, vacations, and holidays, moments that now felt like a different lifetime. Emily pointed to a photo of the three of us at the beach, her smile wide and carefree. "Do you think we'll ever have that again?" she asked. I squeezed her hand, my voice steady. "We may never go back to exactly what we had, but we can build something new, something honest, something strong." The day Emily left for college was bittersweet. We loaded the car, hugged in the driveway, and promised to call every Sunday. As I watched her drive away, I felt a mix of pride and sadness, but also a deep sense of peace. I had done everything I could to protect her, to teach her, to help her become the woman she was meant to be. That evening, I sat on the porch, the house quiet around me, and reflected on the journey. I realized that my story was no longer about revenge or even survival. It was about transformation, about turning pain into purpose, betrayal into wisdom, and fear into hope. The scars remained, but they were a testament to our resilience, not a mark of defeat. As the sun set, I made a silent promise to myself to keep living with integrity, to keep fighting for what mattered, and to never let anyone take my dignity again. The war was over, but the legacy of evidence, boundaries, and silent strategic payback would endure for generations to come. The house felt emptier after Emily left for college, but it was a peaceful emptiness, filled with the echoes of laughter and the quiet satisfaction of a battle well fought. I threw myself into the work of the foundation, expanding our reach and building new partnerships with local organizations. Julia and I spent long hours planning workshops, writing grant proposals, and meeting with survivors who needed guidance and hope. David became a fixture at our events, his calm presence and practical advice making him a mentor to many. One afternoon, as we prepared for a seminar on legal self-defense, Julia pulled me aside, her eyes shining with excitement. "Dad, we've been invited to speak at a national conference on family law. They want us to share our story, to show others how evidence and boundaries can change lives." I felt a surge of pride and a flicker of nerves, but I agreed. The conference was held in a grand hotel downtown, the ballroom filled with lawyers, judges, and advocates from across the country. Julia and I took the stage together, telling our story in vivid detail. The humiliation at graduation, the betrayal, the courtroom battles, and the slow, steady work of healing. We spoke of the importance of documentation, the power of silent, strategic payback, and the need for compassion and resilience. The audience listened in rapt silence, some nodding, others wiping away tears. Afterward, people lined up to thank us, to share their own stories, to ask for advice. One woman, her hands trembling, pressed a note into my palm. "You gave me hope. Thank you." That night, as Julia and I walked through the city, she turned to me, her voice soft. "Do you ever regret how it all happened?" I thought for a moment, then shook my head. I regret the pain, but not the lessons. We're stronger now. We're helping others. That's the best kind of revenge. As we parted ways, I felt a deep sense of peace. The story of my revenge was no longer just about Linda or the courtroom. It was about transformation, about turning pain into purpose, about the quiet, relentless power of truth. The scars remained, but they were a testament to our survival, not a mark of defeat. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them, with evidence, dignity, and the unbreakable bond of family. Autumn faded into winter, and the city was dusted with snow, the streets glowing under strings of holiday lights. The foundation's work grew busier as the year ended, and Julia and I found ourselves fielding calls from across the country. People desperate for advice, for hope, for a way out of their own private hells. We launched a new hotline, staffed by volunteers who had survived their own battles, and the calls poured in day and night. I spent my mornings at the community center, my afternoons in meetings, and my evenings writing articles and guides on evidence-based self-protection. David became our outreach coordinator, organizing support groups and legal clinics, his calm presence a steadying force for everyone he met. Emily called every Sunday, her voice bright with stories of college life, her classes, her new friends, the challenges and triumphs of independence. She told me about a professor who encouraged her to write about her family's journey, and I could hear the pride in her voice as she described her first published essay. "I want people to know that you can survive anything, Dad, that you can come out stronger." I told her how proud I was, how much I loved her, and how her courage inspired me every day. Linda continued her therapy, and while our relationship remained cautious, there was a new warmth in her messages. She sent a card for my birthday, thanking me for my patience and forgiveness, and expressing hope that we could one day sit down together as a family. I replied with a simple note of gratitude, acknowledging her progress and wishing her well. The holidays were quieter than in years past, but they were filled with genuine warmth, dinners with friends, laughter around the table, and the quiet joy of knowing we had survived the storm. On New Year's Eve, Julia hosted a gathering for the Foundation's volunteers. As midnight approached, she raised a glass. "To my father, who taught me that the best revenge is living well, and to everyone here who reminds us that hope is always worth fighting for." The room erupted in applause, and I felt a surge of gratitude for the life I had rebuilt. As the fireworks lit up the sky, I hugged Julia and whispered, We made it, kiddo. We really made it. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the journey, the humiliation, the courtroom battles, the slow, steady work of healing. I realized that my story was no longer about Linda or the pain she had caused. It was about resilience, about the power of evidence and boundaries, about the quiet, relentless strength of a man who refused to be broken. The war was over, but the legacy of dignity, love, and silent strategic payback would last a lifetime. The new year dawned bright and cold, sunlight glinting off the snow and filling my home with a sense of hope I hadn't felt in years. Emily came home for winter break, her arms full of books and stories, her laughter echoing through the house like music. We spent long evenings by the fire talking about her classes, her dreams, and the foundation's growing impact. Julia and David joined us for dinner, and the table was filled with warmth, gratitude, and the quiet joy of a family that had survived the worst and chosen to heal. Linda called on New Year's Day, her voice softer than I remembered. She thanked me for my forgiveness, for the boundaries I'd set, and for the chance to rebuild her relationship with Emily. We spoke for a long time, not as enemies, but as two people who had learned the hard way that dignity and truth matter more than pride or anger. The Foundation's hotline was busier than ever, and I found myself mentoring men and women from all walks of life, people who had been betrayed, humiliated, and underestimated, but who refused to give up. I shared my story at conferences and workshops, always emphasizing the power of evidence, the importance of legal traps, and the quiet, relentless strength of silent, strategic payback. One afternoon, Julia and I were invited to the state capitol to receive an award for our work. As we stood on the steps, cameras flashing, I felt a wave of gratitude for the second chance I'd been given. After the ceremony, Julia hugged me tightly. "We did it, Dad. We turned our pain into something good." I smiled, my heart full. "You did it, Julia. You showed the world that even the deepest wounds can heal." That evening, we hosted a celebration at the community center. Survivors, volunteers, and friends filled the room with laughter and hope. David gave a toast, his voice steady and proud, to Mark, who taught us that dignity is worth fighting for, and to Julia, who proved that forgiveness is the greatest strength. The applause was thunderous, and I felt tears prick my eyes. As the night wore on, I slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The city lights shimmered on the river, and I thought about the journey, the betrayal, the courtroom, the long road back to myself. I realized that my revenge had never been about punishment. It had been about reclaiming my life, my voice, my peace. I had become a mentor, a friend, a father who had learned to forgive without forgetting. The scars remained, but they were a testament to my survival, not a mark of my defeat. As Julia joined me on the steps, her arm around my shoulder, I knew that our story was not just about what had been done to us, but about what we had chosen to do with it. We had turned pain into purpose, silence into advocacy, and fear into hope. The humiliation of that graduation day was behind me, the future wide open. And as the first stars appeared in the winter sky, I whispered a silent thank you to Tom, to David, to Julia, and to the part of myself that had refused to give up. I was no longer underestimated. I was whole,